here with us, worshiping our God together. It is a beautiful day to be together. A beautiful day to focus our minds and focus our energy, focus our attention on God. And I want us to understand, not just during this time, although it certainly is what worship is all about, but it's what our life should be. Our life should be dedicated to God. Our life should be wholly focused on Him. And in a lot of ways, that has been our theme for the year. You know, at the very beginning of the year, which now we're going back almost, we're way over halfway through the year. And in a lot of ways, it's a year that, to me, has moved very quickly. I don't know if it's because 2020 was like 10 years long, it seemed, and now that we're in 21, it just has seemed to move so quickly. But for me, and hopefully for you, the focus that we've been able to put on this year's theme about being involved, about being engaged, has been really profitable. Has been profitable for me in my relationship, certainly with God, and certainly even in my relationships with all of you. As we consider, as we think about what it takes to be a Christian in this world, about what it takes to be righteous, about what it takes to be holy, about what it takes to have a relationship with God. And when we really come to the understanding about what it takes engagement. It takes being all in. It takes words like we've talked a lot about, like diligence, or as we will talk this morning, fervor. It takes those things. It takes energy. It takes action. It takes the attitude that I am giving everything I have to God. And I hope that throughout this year, John and I have been able to portray that in the things that we've had opportunity to talk about. Very specific things, as we're going to talk about today. But even as we've gone through the year, it really, in a lot of ways, has been at the forefront of a lot of my preparation work in getting ready for lessons, even lessons like we've given recently on our focus and how important our focus needs to be, which was last week. So we've talked about all of these things, just to give you kind of a reminder about where we've been. Way back in the month of January, Kevin began talking about our theme and the importance of it. And we made mention that one time a month throughout the year, we would talk about something very specific with regards to our theme. And we've done that each and every month, starting with just our relationship with God and how involved that we have to be with that. We've talked about our relationship with our spouses. We've talked about the importance of prayer, our relationship with the lost, our service within the Lord's church, and even last month, our worship, how engaged that we need to be. But as we were worshiping even today, and as Tim was leading our singing, there was a song we just sang that really struck me. It struck me because of the words that really came from my own mouth, and it came from yours, that go directly to this. So I want everybody to pull a songbook out. We're not going to sing it again, but I do want us to read it. But I want everybody to be looking at it. And I want to remind you of the words that you just sang. In the presence of all of us here, in the presence of God, the words that we just sang, and I pray they are words that we believe. Number 71, a song we're familiar with. We sing it a lot. We've been singing it for a long time. It is a beautiful song. A beautiful picture taken directly from Scripture, the song as written. But I want you to read the words with me, and I want you to think about all that we've talked about this year. I want you to think about your relationship with God, and I want you to think about how engaged you are in it, how involved you are in it, how diligent you are in it, how focused you are in it. I want you to be thinking about that and read these words with me. Number 71. Listen to the way this song is written, the song we just sang together. As the deer pants for the water, so my soul longs after you. You, this is the part that got me this morning. You alone are my heart's desire. and I long to worship you. The second verse, I want you more than gold or silver. Only you can satisfy. You alone are the real joy giver and the apple of my eye. The chorus, you alone are my strength, my shield. To you alone may my spirit yield. You alone are my heart's desire, and I long to worship you. It's not a very long song, but was there a word that stuck out to you? There certainly was for me. There's a word that sticks out for me. It is a short song. It's not even a full page. It is but 2 verses. But it seems like the word alone or only is there a billion times. And as we sang that this morning, and as I was going over that song in my mind, it's really struck me. That's what being engaged and involved with God is all about. It's being only engaged in Him. Now, I know we've got a lot of other things going on in our lives. All of us do. All of us have families. All of us have jobs. All of us have hobbies. We've got children. We've got things that we have going on in our life. But as the Christian, it needs to be just that simple. I am engaged. I am involved alone with God. That dictates everything in my life. Everything. And as we sing that song together, I pray that you believe those words. That that's the desire of your heart. That that's the thoughts in your mind. That is how engaged and involved you are with God. And I think in a lot of ways that's the direction that the elders had in mind for us this year, to be thinking about that level of engagement, that level of involvement, that it dictates every aspect of our life, including the one we're going to talk about this morning. As I made mention, we're going to talk this morning about being engaged, about being involved specifically in our hospitality. Now, all of this was made certainly available to everyone on knowing what was coming each and every month. And I want us to think about this morning. We're going to really boil it down into one kind of simple thought this morning and then use that one thought to kind of make some practical applications out of. But I want us to begin this morning in thinking about our hospitality, about being engaged in that, just by reference, just a definition of what hospitality is or being hospitable is all about. Just looking it up in the dictionary, it is receiving or treating guests or strangers warmly and generously. 2 words I really like. A lot of times you look up a word in just the dictionary, dictionary.com or Webster's, one of those places. Sometimes they're definitions I love. Sometimes they're definitions I don't love a lot. But this is a definition I like, and I like it a lot mainly because of those last 2 words. Because there are words that I understand. There are words that I know. It is receiving guests or strangers, but doing so in a specific way. Not just receiving them. Not just going through the act, not just bringing them in, not just doing something for them to do something for them. That's not what hospitality is. That's not what being hospitable is. It is more than that. It is more involved than that. Even the definition helps us to see that. It's not just receiving or treating guests or strangers, but doing so warmly. Doing so generously. So I want us to be thinking about those things as we study this morning. There are really 2 main passages that I want us to kind of spend some time with that talk specifically about hospitality. 2 main New Testament passages. We're going to look at both of them. But what I want to do this morning is I want to look in the passage, and as Tad has read for us already, I want us to take the verse that we see in a lot of ways the command, be hospitable with one another. But I want us to expand the context this morning of both of the New Testament passages that we will commonly reference when it comes to this topic. One here in the book of Romans, the other in the book of 1 Peter in chapter 4. But I want to expand the context a little bit. because I think it can be really helpful for us. And so if you're still open to Romans chapter 12, this is the first instance that we're going to take a look at. I want to read again, beginning of verse 9, down through verse 13, and then we're going to expand the context this morning. In Romans chapter 12, beginning of verse 9, it says, "Let love be without hypocrisy. Abhor what is evil, cling to what is good. Be kindly affectionate to one another with brotherly love, in honor, giving preference to one another, not lagging in diligence, fervent in spirit, serving the Lord, rejoicing in hope, patient in tribulation, continuing steadfastly in prayer, distributing to the needs of the saints, given or pursuing," your translation may read, "to hospitality." So what we have here in the book of Romans is the common Paul list of things. He is big on lists. That's just the reality. He has lists everywhere, and each of his epistles, they are at times filled with lists. He gives us these things to think about, but I want us to expand this list a little bit by way of context, to get an understanding about why now we have this list of things. Why does he give this to us? What is he talking about? Well, in Romans chapter 12, this chapter specifically, Paul is describing our relationship that we have, not to the world here, but to each other. The relationship that we have to each other. And he will use now a very common illustration that he'll use in other places. He does so in the book of 1 Corinthians. He does so in the book of Ephesians to paint the picture. And it is so good because it's something we all have. Our relationship with one another, the Lord's church, and the illustration of the human body and our relationship with it. Christ is the head, the book of Ephesians teach. We are part of his body. Working together, fingers, toes, knees, elbows, hips, feet, eyes, ears, mouth, every part of the body working in perfect unison. Everything working together, everything needed. And this cohesive unit is the illustration that we have given to us from Paul by inspiration to give us a picture of what God expects his church to be, as unified as our own bodies are. Working together, pushing together. And so the point is being made that we belong to each other. We minister to each other. And I want us to see in Romans chapter 12, the point is being made, we need each other. And I want us to think about that. It will be a key point this morning. The picture that's given here is one in which we have to see everyone else who is here this morning is I need them. Just as I need my hands, or I need my eyes, or I need my tongue, or I need my feet. I need you around. I need you in my life. I need you to be here. Now, it's a word we use a lot, but I want us to understand the power behind that word of need. I need it. Not just I want it or I desire it, I hope to have it. I need it. We do that oftentimes with our kids, right? You know, your kids will come to you and they'll be asking for something. And they'll be like, Dad, listen, I need that. And if you're a parent like me, good ones, right, will say, do you really need that? Right? I mean, that's a question. I've fired back that question hundreds of times probably, right? Let's discuss that. You've used a pretty big word there, need. Let's see, do you really need that? And guess what? They never do. They never need it. Right? They come to you and they ask, but they don't ever need it. Nobody ever comes and says, Dad, I need a glass of water. And I'm like, just get it. It's right here. Right? I mean, they never do that. It always ends with, no, you don't need that. Let's use a different word. You want that? Sure, I can go with that conversation. But need? No, let's not use that word. That's a big word. Well, that's a big word. But that's the point that's being made right here. It's not just that I want to have you in my life, or I want to have you around, or I desire to have the brethren in my life. I need that. So, examination number one this morning. Is that where you are with the people that are sitting around you? Is that your thought? Is that your process? Is that your feelings? Is that your understanding when you look around? And you see the brothers and sisters that you are surrounded by, and you're thinking, you know what, I need them. It is a powerful, powerful thought. You know, a lot of ways in Romans chapter 12 and verse 3, we're at the very outset of the context. You know, Paul says, I say through the grace given to me to everyone who is among you, not to think of himself more highly than he ought to think, but to think soberly as God has dealt to each one a measure of faith. Even in the beginning of this context, Paul is pushing us into an understanding that I've got to take an examination of myself. I've got to take an examination of myself, where I stand within the body and where everyone else is. We've got to have faithful cooperation with everyone, and everyone doing their part. And verses 4 through 8 really paint that picture. And then what we have, beginning of verse 9, that we've read now twice, that this participation that we have with each other, that has to be in perfect unison, that has to be absolute cooperation. Now that unison, that cooperation, that participation that we have with each other, what is it driven by? It is a word that is there multiple times. What is it driven by? What drives the idea that I need you around, that I desire to have a good relationship with you because I need you in my life? What drives that? Well, the word that pops over and over and over is love. Love drives that. Love drives that. So you have in verse 9, let love be without hypocrisy. Verse 10, be kindly affectionate to one another with brotherly love. Love, if you want to stay with the illustration, if you want to stick with that illustration of the body, it is the circulatory system of the spiritual body. Love drives everything. And so in the midst of this point that Paul is giving to us, all of these incredible things, be kind with brotherly love. Give honor to one another. Be fervent in your spirit. Rejoice in hope. Be patient. Pray. Distributing, giving to the needs of those around us. Pursuing hospitality. And so when we study Romans chapter 12, what I want us to understand is this relationship that we have with one another is so much more than a handshake on Sunday mornings, a pat on the back on Wednesday nights. It means a sharing with one another, a sharing of our burdens, a sharing of our blessings. It is that connected. So I want you to keep Romans chapter 12 in your mind. I want to take another step with the other passage that we have, this time in the book of 1 Peter. 1 Peter chapter 4. Now, these are the two passages we will most commonly reference when talking about hospitality because it specifically makes mention of hospitality in both of these. But in 1 Peter chapter 4, I want us to begin with verse 7. This kind of starts the paragraph. But I want you to follow along with me. In 1 Peter chapter 4, beginning in verse 7. But the end of all things is at hand. Therefore be serious and watchful in your prayers. And above all things, have fervent love for one another. For love will cover a multitude of sins. Be hospitable to one another, without grumbling. As each one has received a gift, minister it to one another, as good stewards of the manifold grace of God. If anyone speaks, let him speak as the oracles of God. If anyone ministers, let him do it as with the ability which God supplies, that in all things God may be glorified through Jesus Christ, to whom belong the glory and dominion forever and ever. Amen. And so now I want us to think about this passage here in 1 Peter chapter 4. And one of the points that Peter here is making, is that love, the love that we have for all of the saints, is of utmost importance. Think about how he begins the paragraph. Be serious. Be watchful in your prayers. That's how he begins this thought. It is how we do when we're about to say something serious. We ask someone to sit down. We ask them to focus in. We ask them to pay attention. You need to pay attention. What I'm about to say is important. What I'm about to say is serious. And so Peter says, you be serious. You be watchful. And you have love for one another. And again, there is our word. But this time, he says that love is to be fervent. And I want you to take note. We saw that same word in Romans chapter 12. What an interesting word it is. When I've put these lessons together and been thinking about these things, the one word that has seemed to pop in my mind the most is diligence. It is the word that seemingly this year I've spent the most time kind of thinking about, and rightly so, right? We see the word diligent or diligence. It is definitely a Bible-y word. There's no question about that. It's found all throughout the New Testament. That God wants his people to be diligent in all facets of our life. Be diligent. Giving every effort. Other translations will even make that statement. Make every effort. It is being everything, giving everything that I have. That is what diligent is. It is holding nothing back. It's what we see in athletics a lot. We see that they have given everything. I know I made mention last week that I've been watching the Olympics a lot. And guess what? The Olympics were still going, so I've still been watching. And we were watching just yesterday the marathon, the men's marathon. Silly, I know. I'll never do a marathon or even close to a marathon. But I'll watch one eating a bag of chips. And sure, I'll do that. Sure. And we were watching, and if you don't know anything about running, I mean, they say, again, I don't know anything, only what I heard on TV, and they're always right. They always tell the truth there. And you know, they were talking about the guy that ultimately won. He won gold in Rio as well 5 years ago. That he is the greatest marathon runner of all time. Kipchoge is his last name, from Kenya. The greatest of all time. He's been the only person to run a marathon in under 2 hours. There were varying circumstances to make that possible for him, but still, it was incredible. And when there was about 10 miles to go in 26.2, he just left everyone else. Just left them. And just seemed when he finished, he could have gone a ways more. It was impressive. But what I really took notice of, there were 4 guys behind him. So it was a group of 5 for a long time. Kipchoge leaves them with about 10 miles to go, and now you have these 4 guys left. 4 guys for 2 medals. The bronze and the silver. Kipchoge is going to win the gold. He is gone. You can't even see him anymore. And you saw those 4 guys. And they worked together for a little bit to make sure that group of 4 didn't become 5 or 6. They were kind of working together. But with just a couple of miles to go, they really were going. Just 4 of them. I mean, I don't know how many started, but it was a bunch. But now they're like a mile to go. There's only 4, and half of us are going to win Olympic medals. And they were going. There was another Kenyan at the front of that group for a long time. And they were talking on TV of how important it is for them to win as much as they can. And the other day, last week, in the women's marathon, Kenyans won gold and silver. And they were talking that it would be so big for their country. And so he was in the front for a long time of that group of 4. And with about a mile to go, a little less than a mile, everyone just passed him. And my thought was, why doesn't he just run faster, right? I mean, that's what he does. I mean, I was just sitting there as a very ignorant running person because, as we've talked about, I don't run anywhere, so I don't know anything about it. I used to run places, but now I just don't, right? And so, but I'm watching and I'm thinking, he runs for a living. That's what he does. He's a professional runner. Just run faster. Don't you want the silver? And he just didn't. And it just became clear he had given literally everything that he had. It was interesting that, the Kipchoge guy who I said could have run for 100 more miles, he crossed over and it seemed like he could have gone for a little ways, and he kind of waited for the other guys to get there. But those 4 guys crossed the line, crumpled. I mean, jelly, couldn't even stand up. And I was thinking about that this morning again. That's diligence. Giving everything to something. Nothing else. Did he want that silver medal? Sure he did. Did he want to run faster? Sure. He just didn't have it because he had given everything. And I want us to understand that's what diligence is. That's the kind of effort we've got to put forth in our relationship with God. Being diligent. And so here in this passage and in Romans chapter 12, we have this other really important word, fervent. What that word does is it speaks to eagerness, but maybe important intensity. Eagerness and intensity. And what I want us to understand is when it comes to love, we've got to be diligent for sure, but we've got to be fervent in our love because it's something we have to work at. This kind of love that we read about in Romans chapter 12 and in 1 Peter chapter 4, it isn't just an emotional feeling, although certainly that is involved, but it isn't just an emotional feeling. It is a matter of dedicated will. I have dedicated my will. That's where diligence and fervent comes in. And so when we think about the love that we should have for each other, 1 Peter chapter 4, above all things have fervent love for one another. You be hospitable without grumbling. So the point that he's making is that our love for one another, it's not just about being fervent, but that leads to being practical. Sharing ourselves with other people. In certainly uncomplaining ways. And so I want us to think about these 2 ideas. And I want us to think about other passages that we have. You can read about the elders in the Lord's church in Titus chapter 1 and verse 8, 1 Timothy chapter 3 and verse 2, that it is the duty of the elders to be hospitable. Why is that? Well, think about Romans 12. Think about 1 Peter chapter 4. An elder cannot tend to the flock without knowing the flock, without loving the flock. Hospitality has to be involved with that. But not just them, it's the duty of all of us. Think about a passage like Galatians chapter 6 and verse 2. Bear one another's burdens. It's a command. How can I do that without love? How can I do that without knowledge? How can I do that without hospitality? How can I do that without those things? And so as we've got this principle established, very quickly as we close, all things predicated on love, I want us to think now about some results that come from that. If we are willing to practice this kind of love, if we are willing to be hospitable, if we're willing to pursue that, there are 3 results that can come from that. And the first is this. The first result is it can in every way help to prevent apostasy. Think about a passage like 1 Corinthians chapter 15 and verse 33. Another passage that a lot of us will be familiar with, right? The idea that evil companions corrupt good morals. We understand that. You surround yourself with wicked people, it's going to push you towards wickedness. You surround yourself with evil people, it's going to push you towards evil. That's just the way that it works. And so the flip side of that is also true. You surround yourself with righteous people, it will push you to righteousness. You surround yourself with godly people, it will push you to godliness. And so it is a decision that we've got to make on who we're going to spend our time with. I made mention of this recently. Brandon and I are teaching a high school class, and we've talked a lot about our relationship that we have with God. And because the relationship that we have with God is so important, I need to make wise decisions with the people I have relationships with here on earth. Why? Because those relationships impact my relationship with God. And one of the points that Brandon and I have hammered home is that we have the power to choose what those relationships are. So I want you to think this morning, how long has it been since you invited another Christian, a brother or sister, into your home or just to go and do something? How long has it been since you've made the choice to surround yourself with godly, righteous people? Not just here. We make the choice here to come and worship God. Yes, we do that together, and that's fantastic, and certainly what God wants, and we are uplifting one another when we do that. But when we are here on this day, we come here choosing to worship God. But when was the last time you made a choice to surround yourself with good, godly people? The point that I want to make with this verse, it may be, it has an impact on your weakness, but also can have an impact on someone else's weaknesses. Remember, we're here to love one another. We're here to be with one another. And we need to be here to lift each other up. And we need to be here for one another. Secondly, it can help to prevent division. In a lot of ways, in really maybe all ways, getting acquainted is closely related with getting along, right? Because we understand each other. I'll say that one more time. Getting acquainted is closely related with getting along. When we don't know each other very well, it is very easy to jump to erroneous conclusions about things. That happens all the time. You jump to an erroneous conclusion about something because you just may not know them very well. But if you knew them better, maybe that conclusion you wouldn't come to. Paul will make the point in Galatians chapter 5 as he gives us a list of the works of the flesh, the fruit of the Spirit. In Galatians chapter 5, after he has gone through all of the works of the flesh, and he says, listen, here's the fruit of the Spirit, but listen to how many of these will go to our attitude with one another. Galatians chapter 5 and verse 22, the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, long-suffering, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, self-control. Do any of those talk about our relationship with one another? I mean, we say all of those do. Those are the attitudes that we are to have. I think in a lot of ways, backbitings that we read about or hear about or whisperings in the corner can disappear if we just associate with one another enough to understand one another. Oftentimes, division in the Lord's church happens over misunderstandings. But if we are willing to be with one another, it can certainly have a huge impact on that. And then finally, it can in every way help in converting the lost. Certainly, I'll never be up here to say that people are converted by friendliness. Listen, people shouldn't be converted by friendliness. I understand that. But I think there are a lot of people not converted because of a lack of it. Does that make sense? People shouldn't be converted because of friendliness, converted to Christ. But absolutely, there are a lot not converted because of a lack of it. how we interact, not just with each other here, but how we interact with our neighbors, how we interact with our community. The love that we have, not just for each of us here, but for others. I want us to think about, some of these things, and I want us to think about the reality of where we are. And I want us to think about the relationship that we are to have for and with each other. And I want you this morning to honestly be examining your own heart with reference to the people around. I'm going to rephrase. With reference to all of the people around. It's very easy for us to find ourselves in a little tiny box of the people that we just enjoy being around. And then we pat ourselves on the back because, you know what? Hey, I've had people over. You ask me to think about it. Yeah, I can remember the last time I had, somebody over to our house to enjoy a meal or to enjoy just being with one another. But maybe it's a little tiny box of people. I don't see a little tiny box of people in Scripture. It's everybody. It's everybody. The love that we have for everybody should drive us to want and desire to be with each other. Why? Because we need it. I'm telling you, a simple thing is to get to that understanding where you look at. It's easy for me. I'm standing here, I'm looking, and I can see everybody. Right? I can see everybody this morning. To be able to look around and to come to the conclusion that I need everyone. I need everybody. Man, if we can get to that spot, it'll make a huge impact on the love that we're going to have for each other. It's going to have a huge impact on my involvement with you and your involvement with me. Just that simple understanding that I need you. And so I want us to consider that this morning. Tim is going to lead us in a song of invitation here in just a second. And I want us this morning to be thinking about, several different things and certainly moving forward. I want you to be considering today and this week. I want you to be considering the people that are around you. Listen, in a lot of ways, I put this morning's lesson here on this second Sunday for a reason, because it's a huge part of the elders' thought process for the second and fourth Sunday that we have. Whether it is an opportunity to be with each other, to build those relationships, or to be in the community and build those relationships. Now, it's not just that those are things that can only happen on the second Sunday and fourth Sunday, but it just gives us an opportunity to be thinking. It puts it in front of our minds. It gives us that opportunity to think about it. We have those things all the time. We partake the Lord's Supper this morning. Would anybody ever say that I don't have to think about Jesus and his sacrifice any other times throughout the week because we have that moment here on Sunday? No. It's important to do that all the time, right? Every day. Now, this is a good opportunity, an opportunity that Christ has laid upon us. And the second and fourth Sundays are great opportunities, but it's something we've got to be thinking about all the time. We think about it all the time. And so I would encourage you to open up your mind about that. Open up your mind for opportunities. It's not about just having somebody into my house and putting on some big spread to impress somebody. That's not what this is about. It's just about being with one another. It doesn't even have to have a meal included. It doesn't have to be in a home. It can be outside someplace. Because it's just about being with one another. Because we love each other. And we need each other. And Tim is going to lead us in a song of invitation, and it gives us an opportunity to think about not just our relationship with one another, certainly, but our relationship with God, which, as we started, is the defining relationship. Everything springs off of that. And it may be this morning we can help you with that relationship. If that's the case, you let us know as we stand and sing.